At 75 years old, Chris Norman stands as one of the most recognizable voices in British rock history, a singer whose sound carries decades of emotion, experience, and musical honesty. Long before fame, chart success, or international tours, Chris Norman's life was shaped by music from the very beginning. He was born Christopher Ward Norman on October 25, 1950, in the coastal town of Redcar, North Yorkshire, England. Music was not something he discovered later in life. It was woven into his home, his childhood, and his identity. His father was a professional singer and entertainer, and performances, rehearsals, and melodies were part of everyday family life. For young Chris, music did not feel like a dream or an ambition. It felt natural, almost inevitable, as if it was already waiting for him. When the Norman family later moved to Bradford, Chris found himself surrounded by a lively and changing musical environment. Post-war Britain was going through a cultural shift, especially among young people. Rock and roll, skiffle, and early pop music were reshaping how teenagers express themselves. Radios played new sounds, guitars became symbols of freedom, and music became a way to stand out in a world still recovering from hardship. Chris absorbed all of this quietly but deeply. He listened closely, learned quickly, and began to feel that music was more than entertainment. It was a voice for emotion, rebellion, and connection as a teenager. Chris Norman learned to play the guitar and started performing with school friends. These early performances were not glamorous. They were small, local, and often unnoticed. But they were important. They helped him develop confidence, stage presence, and most importantly, his voice. Even at a young age, Chris's voice was different. It was husky, raw, and emotional, lacking the polished smoothness that many singers of the time aimed for. Instead of sounding trained or theatrical, his voice sounded human. It carried feeling, vulnerability, and sincerity. This quality would later become his greatest strength and the defining feature of his career. In the mid-1960s, Chris joined forces with friends Alan Silson, Terry Utley, and Ron Kelly, who was later replaced by Pete Spencer. Like many young bands, they struggled at first. They played under different names, performed wherever they could, and faced repeated rejection. Success did not come quickly, but those difficult years were essential. They built resilience, discipline, and a strong bond between the band members. Eventually, the group became known as Smokey, a name that would soon be recognized around the world. The real turning point came in the mid-1970s when Smokey began working with the famous songwriting and production duo Nicky Chinn and Mike Chapman. This partnership changed everything. With strong songwriting and professional production, Smokey finally found a sound that matched Chris Norman's voice. Songs like If You Think You Know How to Love Me and Living Next Door to Alice brought emotional storytelling together with catchy melodies. At the center of it all was Chris's voice, carrying both strength and sensitivity. Listeners connected with the honesty in his delivery, feeling that he was singing real emotions rather than performing a role. As Smokey's popularity grew, especially in Europe, Australia, and the United Kingdom, Chris Norman emerged not only as a lead singer, but as the emotional heart of the band. His voice told stories of love, longing, and regret in a way that felt personal to millions of fans. These early years laid the foundation for everything that followed, shaping a career built not on trends or image, but on authenticity, emotion, and a deep respect for music itself. As the 1970s moved forward, Smokey's rise to fame was fast and powerful, turning Chris Norman from a young musician into an international star almost overnight. With hit after hit climbing the charts, the band became a regular presence on radio, television, and concert stages across Europe and beyond. Songs like Living Next Door to Alice, Don't Play Your Rock and Roll to Me, I'll Meet You at Midnight, and Lay Back in the Arms of Someone were not just popular, they became anthems for a generation. These songs spoke about love, heartbreak, and everyday emotions in a simple and direct way, making them easy for listeners to connect with. At the center of every track was Chris Norman's unmistakable voice. Carrying both vulnerability and quiet strength, Smokey's success was especially strong in continental Europe, where the band developed a devoted and long-lasting fan base. While some British bands struggled to maintain popularity outside the UK, Smokey thrived internationally. They sold tens of millions of records, performed to sold-out arenas, and built a reputation as a reliable live act. Audiences felt that Chris Norman was not performing at them, but singing with them. His stage presence was calm and sincere rather than flashy, and this honesty made him deeply relatable. Fans trusted him, and that trust helped build Smokey's enduring appeal. However, behind the scenes, success came with pressure. The music industry in the 1970s was demanding and often unforgiving. Smokey followed a relentless schedule of recording, touring, promoting albums, and appearing on television shows. There was little time for rest or reflection. While the band enjoyed the reward of fame, the constant pace began to take a toll. Creativity sometimes felt restricted, as expectations from record labels and producers pushed the band to repeat successful formulas rather than explore new ideas. For Chris Norman, this pressure slowly created a sense of frustration. Although he was grateful for Smokey's success, he began to feel limited as an artist. He had grown emotionally and musically, but he felt that the band's image and sound no longer fully represented who he was becoming. His songwriting instincts were changing, and he wanted to explore music that felt more personal and reflective. This internal struggle was not dramatic or public at first. It developed quietly, shaped by years of experience and self-examination. By the early 1980s, the members of Smokey were increasingly aware that they were creatively constrained. The band was still popular, but the excitement that once fueled their work had begun to fade. For Chris Norman, the question became impossible to ignore. Should he remain in a successful band that no longer fulfilled him creatively, or take a risky step into the unknown? Leaving Smokey would mean giving up stability, recognition, and a proven formula for success. It would also mean facing the possibility of failure alone. In 1986, Chris Norman made the difficult decision to leave Smokey and pursue a solo career. For many artists, such a move marks the beginning of decline rather than growth. History is full of singers who struggled to escape the shadow of their former bands. But for Norman, this decision was not driven by ego or dissatisfaction with his bandmates. It was driven by a deep desire for artistic freedom and honesty. He wanted to sing songs that reflected his own experiences, emotions, and outlook on life. The choice carried real risk, but also opened the door to transformation. Chris Norman was no longer bound by expectations tied to a band identity. He was free to experiment, collaborate, and express himself more fully. This moment marked the end of one important chapter in his life, but it also prepared him for one of the most meaningful partnerships and successes of his career, a collaboration that would soon bring him together with Suzi Quatro and change the direction of his musical journey forever. Chris Norman's decision to leave Smokey in 1986 marked a turning point that few could have predicted with confidence. While many fans feared that a solo career might struggle without the familiar band behind him, Norman was quietly preparing for a fresh beginning. That new beginning arrived almost immediately through an unexpected but deeply meaningful collaboration with Suzi Quatro. Their duet, Stumblin In, released in 1978 and later becoming even more popular during his solo rise, became one of the defining moments of his post-Smokey career. The song was gentle, emotional, and sincere, offering listeners something different from the energetic rock anthems of the past. It revealed a softer, more intimate side of Norman's voice and highlighted a rare musical chemistry between two respected artists. Suzi Quatro was already a powerful figure in the music world by the time their paths crossed. She was known not only for her chart success, but for breaking barriers in a male-dominated industry. As a female rock musician who played bass and fronted her own band, she challenged expectations and reshaped the image of women in rock music. Chris Norman recognized this immediately. Rather than trying to overpower or overshadow her, he met her as an equal. Their voices blended naturally, creating a conversation rather than a competition. Stumblin In succeeded because it felt honest, balanced, and emotionally real. The success of the duet surprised many critics. The song climbed charts in several countries and introduced Chris Norman to a new generation of listeners. It also helped reshape public perception of him. No longer seen only as the voice of Smokey, he was now recognized as a solo artist capable of emotional depth and maturity. This collaboration gave him confidence that his instincts were right and that he could stand on his own without abandoning the sincerity that had always defined his music. Following this breakthrough, Chris Norman released a series of solo albums that further strengthened his reputation. Songs like Midnight Lady, Some Hearts Are Diamonds, and No Arms Can Ever Hold You found particular success in Germany, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe. In these regions, Norman achieved near legendary status, performing to large and devoted audiences. His music resonated strongly because it spoke about love, loss, hope, and reflection in a simple and direct way. He did not chase trends or attempt to reinvent himself dramatically. Instead, he trusted the emotional power of honest storytelling. What made Norman's solo work stand out was its consistency. While many artists struggled to redefine themselves after leaving a successful band, he embraced his strengths. His voice, now shaped by experience and time, carried even more emotion than before. His performances felt personal, almost conversational, allowing listeners to feel seen and understood. This connection became the foundation of his long-lasting appeal. Throughout this period, Norman continued to reflect on the artists who influenced and challenged him, and Suzi Quatro remained one of the most important among them. He admired her courage, independence, and refusal to be molded by industry expectations. Their collaboration was not just a professional success, but a symbol of mutual respect. It represented a moment when two artists, each strong in their own identity, came together to create something lasting and meaningful. This phase of Chris Norman's career confirmed that leaving Smokey had not been an escape from the past, but a step toward growth. His solo success proved that emotional honesty could still find a wide audience, even in a changing musical landscape. And at the heart of that success was a partnership that reminded him and his listeners that true music is built on connection, respect, and shared feeling rather than image or trends as the years passed. Chris Norman proved that his success was not limited to one era or one moment in time. While many artists from the 1970s slowly faded from public attention, Norman continued to build a career defined by consistency, dedication, and emotional honesty. His ability to remain relevant was not based on chasing modern trends or reinventing himself dramatically. Instead, it came from staying true to the qualities that had always set him apart: his voice, his sincerity, and his deep connection with audiences. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Norman toured extensively across Europe, where his fan base remained especially strong. His concerts often sold out, drawing listeners who had grown up with his music, as well as younger fans discovering his songs for the first time. On stage, he delivered performances that felt genuine and unforced. His voice, though shaped by time, retained its emotional power. Many fans noted that hearing him live felt less like attending a show and more like sharing a moment of reflection and memory. He did not rely on elaborate stage effects or spectacle. The focus remained on the music and the emotions it carried. In 1994, Chris Norman received one of the most meaningful recognitions of his solo career when he was awarded CMT Europe's International Video Star of the Year. At a time when music television played a major role in shaping global fame, this award highlighted his ability to connect visually and emotionally with audiences across borders. It was a clear sign that his appeal was not limited to nostalgia. His music continued to speak to people in the present, proving that emotional truth could outlast changing trends a decade later. In 2004, Norman once again captured public attention by taking part in a popular comeback television show on the German network ProSieben. The program celebrated legendary artists and offered them a platform to reconnect with audiences. For Norman, it became an opportunity to remind viewers why his music had never truly disappeared. One of the most talked about moments of the show came when he performed Stumblin In as a duet with pop star Suzi Quatro. The performance blended nostalgia with fresh energy, creating a bridge between past and present. Longtime fans were moved, while new viewers were introduced to the emotional strength of his voice. The emotional highlight of the series came during the final episode, when Chris Norman was joined on stage by his former band Smokey for a closing performance. The reunion felt sincere rather than staged, offering a sense of closure and celebration rather than revival for commercial gain. It reminded audiences of the shared journey that had shaped their lives and careers. For Norman, it was a moment of reflection, honoring the past while standing firmly in the present. His status as an international performer was further reinforced in 2019 when he appeared as a headlining act at the prestigious White Nights Music Festival in St. Petersburg. The event was organized to celebrate the 50-year career of Russian cultural icon Alla Pugacheва, and being chosen as a headliner spoke volumes about the respect Norman commanded. Sharing the stage with artists such as Level 42 and Bonnie Tyler, he delivered a performance filled with experience and undiminished passion. Under the glowing white night sky, His music once again proved its ability to connect across generations and cultures. What truly defines Chris Norman's longevity is not just his continued presence, but the trust he has built with audiences over time. He has never relied solely on memories of past success. Instead, he has honored his history while continuing to create and perform with honesty. His career stands as proof that true musical legacy is measured not by trends or headlines, but by the lasting emotional impact left on listeners year after year. While Chris Norman's professional life has unfolded on stages across the world, his personal life has followed a very different path, one marked by stability, loyalty, and a clear desire to remain grounded. In an industry often associated with excess, broken relationships, and constant change, Norman's private life stands out as a quiet but powerful contrast. Long before fame reshaped his world, he built a foundation that would support him through decades of success and pressure. In 1970, when his career with Smokey was only beginning to take shape, Chris Norman married his wife, Linda. At that time, there were no sold-out arenas, international tours, or chart-topping hits. Their relationship was formed in ordinary circumstances, grounded in youth, shared experiences, and mutual trust. This timing proved to be deeply important. Because their marriage existed before fame, it was not shaped by celebrity or public expectations. Instead, it was built on understanding and commitment, values that would later help them navigate the challenges of a life in music. Over the years, Norman has rarely spoken publicly about his marriage, choosing instead to let his actions speak for themselves. In an industry known for constant attention and intrusion, he and Linda worked hard to keep their relationship private. Friends and colleagues have often described their partnership as strong and respectful, rooted in support rather than display. Linda remained largely behind the scenes, offering emotional stability, while Norman faced the demands of recording, touring, and maintaining a long-term career. Her presence allowed him to remain focused and balanced, even at moments when the pressures of fame could easily become overwhelming. Together, Chris and Linda Norman raised 5 children, a responsibility that Norman has always treated as central to his identity. Despite spending long periods away from home due to touring and studio work, he made conscious efforts to remain involved in his children's lives. Family time was not viewed as something secondary or optional. Instead, it served as an anchor, reminding him of what truly mattered beyond applause and recognition. Fatherhood shaped his outlook, encouraging patience, perspective, and emotional awareness, qualities that later found their way into his music. As the years passed and his career continued to evolve, Norman began to seek a lifestyle that offered greater privacy and control. In 1986, the same year he left Smokey to pursue a solo career, the Norman family made a significant decision to relocate to the Isle of Man. This move was not simply about geography. It represented a conscious choice to step away from the intense spotlight of mainland celebrity culture. The Isle of Man offered peace, a close-knit community, and a slower pace of life that suited Norman's values. Living on the island allowed Norman to focus on his music without being constantly surrounded by the pressures of the entertainment industry. His children were able to grow up away from constant media attention, enjoying a sense of normalcy rarely available to the families of famous musicians. The environment provided space for reflection and creativity, giving Norman the freedom to write and record on his own terms. From this quiet base, he continued to tour internationally and release new music, proving that artistic success did not require living at the center of the industry. The Isle of Man became more than a home. It became a creative refuge. It allowed Chris Norman to reconnect with the values that had guided him since his youth: commitment, family, and authenticity. In choosing this life, he demonstrated that long-term success does not have to come at the cost of personal balance. His personal journey stands as a reminder that true fulfillment is often found not in constant attention, but in stability, purpose, and the relationships that endure long after the spotlight fades. At 75 years old, Chris Norman has reached a stage in life where reflection comes naturally and honesty feels necessary. After decades in the music industry, countless performances, and years of quiet observation, he no longer feels the need to measure his words carefully or protect old boundaries. Time, he believes, has a way of clearing away fear and misunderstanding. It is from this place of calm confidence that Norman has finally spoken openly and at length about Suzi Quatro, a fellow artist who shared his era and helped change the face of rock music forever. Looking back to the early 1970s, Norman describes a music scene that felt raw, competitive, and full of possibility. Everything was moving fast, and no one truly knew where the limits were. Artists were experimenting, pushing boundaries, and trying to survive in an industry that rewarded success but offered little protection. It was during this intense and exciting time that Suzi Quatro emerged as a force that could not be ignored. According to Norman, her arrival changed the atmosphere almost instantly. She did not follow the rules, and more importantly, she did not ask permission to break them. Norman speaks with deep respect when he recalls Quatro's presence. As a woman playing bass and fronting a hard-edged rock band, she challenged long-held assumptions in a male-dominated world. At the time, this was not just unusual, it was considered risky. Many women in music were expected to fit specific roles or images, often shaped by others. Quatro refused that path. She stood on stage with confidence, strength, and authenticity, and demanded to be taken seriously as a rock artist. Norman admits that her confidence forced many male musicians, himself included, to rethink their assumptions. What impressed him most was her refusal to compromise her identity. Behind the scenes, the pressures were intense. The industry often tried to shape artists into something more marketable, something easier to control. Norman recalls that Quatro resisted these forces with determination. She knew who she was and protected that identity fiercely. This strength came at a cost. She had to work harder than many of her peers to earn respect, and she faced criticism that male artists rarely encountered. Norman does not speak of this lightly. He acknowledges that history has not always given her the credit she deserves. When asked why he chose to speak so openly now, at 75, Norman offers a simple answer. Age brings honesty. With time, the fear of being misunderstood fades, replaced by a desire to set the record straight. For him, fairness means recognizing influence where it truly belongs. He believes that Suzi Quatro's contribution to rock music goes far beyond chart positions or fashion statements. She opened doors, raised standards, and proved that talent and determination matter more than expectations. Norman also reflects on how time has softened old rivalries and misunderstandings. In their younger years, artists were often caught up in competition, survival, and ambition. Silence or distance did not always mean dislike. Sometimes it meant uncertainty or pressure. Now, looking back, Norman feels only gratitude. He is thankful to have shared that era with artists like Quatro, people who pushed the industry forward and challenged others to do.